Hi, today I want to talk about a wine or wine region in Italy. I had a request a long time ago from one of my early subscribers. I believe it was T-Man, T.Man. And if that's not you, I apologize, but I'll figure it out. Anyway, I wanted me to do something on Italian wine. I've meant to, I've actually did one, and the sound was completely messed up on it, so I had to basically throw that one out. It's just taken me a long time to get back to it. So anyway, what I have got today is an Italian wine, and this one is from Tuscany. Now, Tuscany, I'll pour it out here. Tuscany is probably one of the most well-known regions of Italy. And we'll put a map up there so you can get a better idea where it's at. And set this out of the way so I don't knock it over. Okay, so one of the key things about Tuscany is the main grape that you'll hear of in Tuscany is Sangiovese. And I may pronounce that a little bit differently than others, a little bit wrong, in other words. So don't hold me to that. But Sangiovese is the predominant grape of Tuscany. Now, Tuscany has another thing about it in particular, which kind of plays into this. It's got a subregion, 3 subregions actually, but one of them in particular is very well known. In fact, if you hadn't heard of Tuscany, you may have heard of this region. It's called Chianti. And yeah, there's a classic line out of what is it, Silence of the Lambs, and talking about eating human parts and going with no, or fava beans or something like that, and always with a nice Chianti. You recognize that reference from the old Hannibal Lecter. If not, don't worry about it. It was an interesting movie, not one of my favorites. Okay, we're not here to talk about movies, though. We are here to talk about wine. And like I said, this is a Tuscan wine, and the main grape in this one, just by I can tell by tasting, I didn't even look at the bottle, is Chianti. I'm sorry, is Sangiovese. So what are we talking about with this? Nice nose. It's got a little bit of leatheriness to it. It's an interesting wine. And not one of my favorite grapes personally, but it's very drinkable. Okay, let's talk about Chianti though in particular. Again, this is what most people know the region for. So a little bit of history on it. So I had some notes here since my memory is kind of bad on some of this stuff. Okay, the traditional formula for Chianti, the wine that was made in this region that it became known for originally, was Sangiovese being the main one. Also, and I'm not probably going to say this right, Canaiolo. My Italian is really, really bad. That was a secondary grape that would be mixed in with it. It'd be primarily Sangiovese. And then Canaiolo be mixed in, and then to brighten it up, in the older traditional recipe, to brighten it up, make it a little bit more drinkable early on, they would add a white, either Malvasia and or Trebbiano. Now, and then it would be aged in a very neutral oak, large oak barrels that had been used time and time again, year after year. So when we're talking about an older barrel that's been used for a long time, not the first time or second time or even third time, it becomes referred to as neutral oak. In other words, the oak in the barrel doesn't really impart any flavor or character directly to the wine. However, you do still get a little bit of oxidation through the oak that you would get with new or used oak. So traditional formula called for it to be aged in neutral oak, essentially. All right, now, that was all well and good for a long time. However, around World War II, post-World War II, economic things changed and they had more interest in the area, and there's a high demand for Chianti. What started happening then is to meet that demand, they changed the recipe a bit. There's some other factors that went into it. Back up just a bit on the Sangiovese grape rather. It is known for creating a lot of clones. In other words, it kind of mutates. This vine will produce it this way, and then you get a seed off that or something, and it comes out a little different in the next one. A lot of variations. They don't all taste and have the same characteristics from one Sangiovese grape vine to the next. So you're getting a lot of that, and when you got into other regions of Tuscany or outside of Tuscany, if they're growing these grapes and then planting them in that region, you got even more clonal variation. Okay, clonal comes from the word clone, to make a replica of, basically a biological replica. So even though most people think of it as a laboratory thing, it can be done other ways. Anyway, to the point, They were getting a lot of Sangiovese grapes. Oh boy, getting a lot of Sangiovese grapes that were not matching the original clonal varieties of the Chianti region. Therefore, when they made the wine, it didn't have the same taste characteristics. But there was such a high demand coming in from all over the world because it was a relatively inexpensive wine and really easily made, didn't have to age a long time. Things like this made it quick to produce. So what happens is they started blending it with more and more of the white. At one point, up to 30% white instead of just like 3 to 5% or something like that. So it changed the profile of the wine. It was still drinkable, but it was much lower quality, and it kind of hit its low point towards the 1970s. And at that point, people were buying it not so much because they liked the wine, but it was cheap, and it came in this nice little kind of fat round bottle with a little basket around the outside of it. So people buy it, keep the bottle, dump the wine, and it just really wasn't that great. So about that same time, they started realizing in the Tuscan growers or Chianti growers, they said, hey, we've got to change some things here. And a number of other factors are coming into play, some more historical that, it started out low back here and now it was rising up, and it kind of coincided with this point in the 70s. And that led to what became known as Super Tuscans. Okay, what, you may ask, is a Super Tuscan? Okay, Super Tuscan still is based on Sangiovese. However, instead of mixing with the traditional grapes and the formula that was used, it was now being mixed with other grape varietals, particularly Cabernet Sauvignon being one of them, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and that were some of the other grapes that were mixed in. There's still some traditional in there if the grower chose to use them. But the white grapes were being left out more and more. The other thing, instead of being aged in a neutral oak, they were now being aged in small French oak casks. There's a name for it, I don't remember, it's an Italian name, but basically instead of a big barrel, it's kind of a smaller cask. So, roughly this big around, maybe about that tall. Don't know the exact dimensions, but quite a bit less wine would go in one of those than a traditional barrel. So that meant you had a lot more exposure to the oak on the juice itself as it fermented or as it aged. And that, of course, changed the character of the wine. These were new oak barrels, new French oak, versus the older oak neutral barrels that were probably from, the Eastern European area. I can't think of the name right off. Hungary, and in that area. Hungarian oak is still used quite a bit today. A little bit different flavor profile, but then again, if you're using the same ones that are over the course of years, all the oak flavor was already out of them on the older barrels. So yeah, we go from the old barrels to the new casks. You're going from Sangiovese in white and a few other native reds to Sangiovese and the more classical French grapes, for example, the Cabernet Sauvignon, and so on. So you've changed the flavor profile quite a bit. Now this caused a problem legally because the laws for Chianti said this is how you will make Chianti, Sangiovese and this and this and this in the large oak neutral barrels. Well, if they were doing it the other way, then it's not Chianti anymore in terms of the legal definition. So they were frowned upon by the wine government of Italy in that area and became basically table wines, was the highest classification they could get. They were grown and produced in Tuscany, but they were Tuscan table wines. Even though they came to be fairly expensive by comparison to the other Chiantis of the region and much better quality by all standards, by law, they were still just table wines. So the press kind of came up with the term Super Tuscan for them, and that's called, and it still holds to this day. They have since changed the laws. I believe it's DOC in Italy, or DOCG, for a more sub-region. So they have changed the laws, so the Super Tuscans would now qualify as Chiantis or Chianti area wines. However, a lot of the growers still prefer to keep the Super Tuscan on their label rather than change it because it is so well known and has become popular in and of itself. So this one, let's see, I need to look and tell for sure. Real quick look at the bottle here so you can tell what's in it. Reading the whole thing out loud. Oh, unfortunately, it's not telling me what I want to know. So this one definitely has the Sangiovese in it. Is labeled only as a Tuscan wine, so basically a table Tuscan wine. Quite good. It is very on the acid side, which makes sense. Italian wines can tend to be that way just because they're meant to be consumed with food, and I'm not eating anything, therefore it tastes more acid. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit more about not all Italian wines, of course, but at least about the Tuscan region and specifically the Chianti region. So with that, enjoy your wine and cheers. Sauterne is a very different wine in that the way it's made is left on the vine, the grapes are left on the vine until the point where they shouldn't be by a lot of people's standards. And it takes certain growing conditions for this to happen, but if they get the right amount of rain and moisture at the right time and all the conditions come together right, which doesn't happen every year, the grapes start to get moldy in a particular way, and it's yeah, if you and I were looking at those in the grocery store, we'd turn up our nose, walk away, and get as far away from those as we could.